Throughout the years, my mom and I, like, we've always talked. It's like best friends. I mean, I've never felt like, in a sense, that she was any bit older than me. I definitely know that those times have been something that I'm going to cherish and look back on as most precious.
When she was little, she was just the same kind of personality she is now. Ginger was very compliant. I mean, if I even had to say, don't do that, you'd think she was going to cry.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to Wednesday, December 21st, 2022. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And listen, it's only a few more days until the Christian holiday of Christmas, and Hanukkah is going on, as well as today is winter solstice. There's a lot happening, and it's a blizzard here in Minnesota. Well, it's coming. It's been on and off snowing, so wherever you are, stay warm. Yesterday, Jinger Duggar, Volo, announced her new book and an offer to people to pre-order her book. Now, the pre-order of the book basically gave people the opportunity to get the first chapter of her book, Becoming Free Indeed. She has done a lot of media, well, on her social media at least, to say that this is the most important book that she's ever had to do, and it's been the hardest book that she's ever had to write. So obviously, I took the opportunity to give my pre-order number to her, and I sent over my receipt, and I got a copy of the first chapter and introduction of Becoming Free Indeed. The book itself is co-authored by a friend of Jeremy's, and the language of the book, I can tell you right off the bat, doesn't really sound like Ginger. So it's pretty clear that the imprint of Jeremy's friend and the theology of John MacArthur that they're all ascribing to at Grace Community Church is all over this book. So if you are looking for a book that will help you deconstruct your faith or disentangle without getting sort of caught up in something else, this book might not be the right one for you. But it's not a tell-all, as she stated. It's actually pretty dry in the theology. But there was a few things that I found in her first chapter interesting. The chapters after the first chapter are when she's going to talk about Bill Gothard. She didn't even bring up his name in the first chapter. Instead, she spoke about Joshua Harris, the man who wrote Kissing Dating Goodbye. He was the guy that wrote all the books, evangelical, and he pushed this idea of courting. In 2019, Joshua decided that he no longer believed what he was teaching. He realized the harms that his book caused to people, and this idea that courtship and having your parents placing you in a courtship and not kissing before marriage was really hurting people. And so he, being the, I don't know, evangelical grifter that he was, decided to put this deconstruction seminar together for like over $200 where he taught people how to lose their faith or to deconstruct their faith. He could have just come out and said something and been like, I'm not a believer, without having to teach people how to deconstruct, which some people gave him criticism for. This book seems to be a response not to Bill Gothard, but to Joshua Harris's deconstruction movement. And I think she actually misunderstands what deconstruction is. But that's okay. But the sad thing is, in my opinion, is right off the bat, I get the sense that this book is being heavily influenced by Jeremy and his friend that helped co-author the book. And in the very introduction of the book, she has some pretty interesting things to say about her family. So let's dive into Ginger's first chapter. I'm not going to give you all the details, but I'll go over some of the highlights. Before I dive into today's topic, can you please do me a favor, give this video a thumbs up. If you need to wait until the end to give the video a thumbs up, that's fine too. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you've not yet subscribed, and turn notifications on so you know when I go live or new content loads. And as always, leave some comments. Okay, so the video that Ginger made back in a couple months ago when she announced her book is actually the introduction of this book. So Ginger says in her introduction that her motivation is to actually speak about her own journey because she grew up in this institution of basic life principles. And she says that, the precipitous of this book was going to the conference one year and realizing that a lot of her friends had left the IBLP and also left the faith. She said that her faith was still intact, but she was involved in an unhealthy version of Christianity. She said, "My hope is that this book will be a help to my friends who no longer love Jesus. They were taught harmful and destructive teachings that have nothing to do with who Jesus really is. They thought that was what Christianity was all about, but it isn't." So right off the bat, I feel like she's going to be doing a lot of evangelizing to people about why this brand of the IBLP was wrong and what she's found is what's right. And this is not super uncommon with John MacArthur and his pastors and followers. They spend a lot of time in their sermons just talking about how everyone else has it wrong. Like they are in fact the ones that have the true and unfiltered, unbridled version of the truth of the Bible, and they are the only ones delivering the message. John MacArthur, through his church, believes that his church should be the church of the United States. He doesn't believe in freedom of religion because he believes that only the way that he teaches and the way that he teaches other people to teach is the only way that faith should be instructed, which in and of itself is incredibly toxic because the foundation of this country is built on people having a freedom of religion. People left England to get away from state-run religion. She also feels a sense of responsibility in writing this book because she says that she understands that this book is going to go beyond her friends. And it's all because she wrote a book with her sisters. So she said, "I want this book to bring many of you into my life beyond television. I'm thankful for the millions of people who have watched my family over the years, who saw me grow up, and I know that many of you do not believe the same things I do about God and the Bible. I invite you into my life so that you can see that through the highs and lows, the trials my family has endured, and the changes in what I believe and how I live, that Jesus is my strength, he is worthy, and I pray this book will help you see why I follow him." She's probably getting, in my opinion, a lot of criticism from her family about, the choices that she's made in how she chooses to dress and the life that she chooses to lead, because she's a little bit less strict. Though a lot of people who follow MacArthur or have left the MacArthur church will say that even though they demonize legalism, the church itself is filled with legalism. If you go to Grace Community Church's website, there are pages upon pages upon pages of what people are expected to do, how members are supposed to act, what people are supposed to wear. I mean, it's just a different brand of the IBLP with just not as much toxicity. It's just more mainstream. That's my opinion. But it's a little bit different than the IBLP, I guess. Anyways, she says right off the bat that she asked her friend Corey to help write this book. She does not tell you that Corey is actually a student of John MacArthur. She says, "I asked a friend of mine, Corey Williams, to help. He's a gifted writer and a student of the Bible who has helped me articulate what I believe in a way that I hope is helpful for you." So it's her language that's in this first introduction, but the way that the book is written and the vocabulary that is used after this first chapter, it's very hard to believe that Jinger has thoughts that are this sophisticated in biblical senses, because she's not gone to seminary. It literally, a lot of what they say in the way it's written sounds like someone that's in seminary, and Corey is. So it's hard because it feels like Corey is the ghostwriter and he's almost writing himself into the book. Instead of this being a story about her, it should almost be like a co-authored book. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, she said it's the most challenging book that she's written. And then there's this very interesting part at the very end of this where she does this very long critique about her parents. This is what she said. "I want you to know that the start of this book is not a tell-all. It is not a critique of my childhood, and I had a wonderful childhood. My parents loved me and sacrificed so much for me, for all of us. They invested their time and energy and souls into raising me and my brothers and sisters. Their patience, kindness, and love are things I want to imitate in raising my girls. They pointed me to Jesus. So this is not a book about them. I love my mom and dad and entire family. This book is about me and my spiritual journey. It is the story of my faith and how I've had to figure out what I truly believe and why I believe it. This is my theological memoir. So this is coming from a woman that has gone from the IBLP straight into the hands of Jeremy Volo, who is a seminary student and a pastor of John MacArthur. Feels a little bit exploitative, right, in my opinion, because I have a little bit of this part of her book seems a little bit disingenuous to me. If you believe that the way that your childhood was good, then you can't believe, how do you dissect that from the rules that your parents adhered to under Bill Gothard? Were your parents really good parents if they followed a man that had all these people accusing him of SA? And the SA allegations were happening in the 80s, not just in the 90s, well before you were born, before your brothers were born, your sisters were born, and your parents were still involved in it. So can you really say that you had a wonderful childhood even though you were raised under this and your parents implemented these teachings? Is it a means to say that it's not their fault, it's the fault of Gothard because they chose to follow Gothard and continue to follow Gothard? That kind of seems a little bit disjointed to me, because if you're going to say that Bill Gothard is wrong and the Duggars are subscribing to Gothard and you're saying that the teachings are dangerous and harmful, then you would have to, in some context, believe that what your parents implemented in the home was harmful. And I don't know if that's just her trying to be softer, but it seems like this caveat to try to get people to understand, or maybe her parents to know it's not about them. Now, in the very first chapter, she likens how she says the very first book or movie she ever watched with Jeremy was after they got married, and it was The Truman Show. And it was all about how Truman was this guy that was a reality star, and producers were basically picking his life and, putting him in all these different positions. And he didn't really know what he was doing or what was happening. He didn't even know that he was in a reality show. And Jeremy had said that that movie was his life, except for the spouse picking part. So she says that she's been on television since 2004, and she explains how some of the challenges of growing up on TV. She said, "For me, one of the challenges has been dealing with people's expectations. When strangers expect me to make certain decisions, even rooting for me to make them as if I'm a character on a sitcom. They seem to forget that I'm a real person with my own feelings and emotions. Add my family's value to the equation and you get even more criticism, opinions, and debates about how I should live. Every decision is put under a microscope, dissected, and either criticized or praised." She said another challenge has been dealing with a lack of privacy. Whether I'm being recognized in public or chased by photographers, I'm still trying to navigate a life lived publicly. I always find it odd when you have this struggle of someone saying, I don't like that I'm a public and I don't have privacy, but I'm still continuing to put myself out there. Jinger is very public because her husband depends on her making money on social media, because Jeremy makes no money in seminary. And the only way that she feels she can make money is by writing books and putting out content on social media. So for her, she feels like she has to have a public life. She could do something else, but I think they've gotten used to a standard of living that they got through the show. So it's kind of like this, she's been pushed into this life and then doesn't really know how to get out. And she does have people analyzing her choices, but I also think that because of the way that she grew up, she's hypersensitive to people being critical, because she was taught that everyone outside of her was wrong. And so if we don't think she's right, then she feels like we're persecuting her. That's really a fundamental part of the IBLP. So Free Jinger, the forum that was created after the first documentary that was created about the Duggars, she talks about the creation of this forum and how she thought it was funny that it was named after her, and she didn't really understand why it was named after her. She realized that it was probably because she liked to go into big cities. She talks about her interest in traveling. And she said that, she felt at first that it was like a negative forum, but then she sort of thought it was sweet that people cared about her. I still to this day don't think she really understands what Free Gingers Forum was about, which was really about helping and encouraging and hoping some of the girls would break free from the strict rules of the house she lived in. Not from faith. People didn't want to save her from faith. They wanted to get her out of the IBLP and get her out of the world of legalism inside the Duggars house. And the Duggars house was so incredibly strict that it wasn't just about the IBLP, it was about getting her away from the Duggars. But she seems to think that it was about freeing her from any and all rules, which isn't really the truth, at least in my opinion. But she's also kind of offended by this idea that she needs to be freed. So she said, this is what she says: the curators of the website saw in me a girl that they assumed didn't have a good life because she didn't have unbridled freedom. They thought if this girl could break from her family's ultra-conservative rules, if she could wear what she wanted, date who she wanted, and pursue the career that she wanted, and eat and drink what she wanted, then she would be happy. And they're not alone. Most people think they have to be free from all restraints to be happy. Freedom is in the water in which our culture swims, and something as essential as most people as gravity. So I think it's caring that others want this for me, even if I don't embrace this version of a good life. Okay, so when you grow up in a world of the IBLP and your whole life is dictated by like strict guidelines, and you have this distrust for the government and the outside, people assume that there's not rules, but there are rules and laws when you live in a civilized society. So freedom doesn't mean that you get to do whatever you want and without any consequence. That's not freedom. Freedom is having the choices to live in a free society, but you also don't get to break the law. And I think sometimes people equate like freedom as an absolute, like if you're super strict, then you're going to go all out. And that can happen. Like some people that come out of these systems, they get so overwhelmed because they don't know how to make any choices that they just try everything. And that can be dangerous too. But it's not black or white. And I think she's still sort of stuck in that like legalism side of things. It's a very interesting first chapter because after she talks about this, then she talks about this guy named Joshua Harris who wrote this book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and how he was really influential in purity culture. And she was really shocked when she found out that he left Christianity and that he was teaching classes on how to reframe your story and how to deconstruct. And this seemed to really offend her. And it's odd that she has these very strong feelings about Joshua Harris because honestly, this to me feels like it's coming from Corey or Jeremy or whoever's, writing this. They say it's Corey, but part of me feels like this is in conjunction with Jeremy. But she tries to say that what Harris is doing is he's trying to take people out of faith. And I don't know that that's what he's doing. To me, deconstruction doesn't mean that you have to leave faith. It means that you deconstruct from your life the false things that you learned and try to find the truth. And that can mean that you still believe, and it can also mean that you leave faith. It doesn't mean either or. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to stick in this and then be completely out. There's plenty of people I speak to that have left the IBLP that still have their faith. But it seems like this book is a response to Harris, not to Bill Gothard, which is really odd because in the very first chapter and even in the introduction, she's not said the basic life principles or Bill Gothard's name. Instead, she's like poking at Joshua Harris, trying to get people out of the faith, which seems to offend her. And I think if you're looking for a book that's going to make you feel uplifted and happy, I don't know that this is the book. This is going to be a lot of, in my opinion, trying to push people to realize that they cannot be free without God. And that's not really deconstruction. If you have to tell someone else how they need to deconstruct or disentangle, that's not really, it's just trying to move them from one thought process to another. Anyways, something kind of sad I thought is she wrote this about, she thinks that the deconstruction movement is harmful because it actually gives people unfettered freedom. She said, I've come to realize that unfettered freedom does not produce the good in life. In the end, it often leads to more bondage. Why? Because it puts me in charge of my life. And I'm not the best judge of what's best for me. If given limitless options and the responsibility of figuring out what is going to make me truly happy, I struggle to commit to anything. I have the same problem when I'm trying to pick a show on Netflix. I just keep scrolling, always wondering if there's something better, if there's a better show out there. In the case of life's big decisions and questions becomes, is there a better job, home, or relationship? I'm left constantly second guessing my choices. To me, this isn't about faith, because if you read the Bible, the God does not say that he's making all of your decisions for you, and he's definitely not telling people that it's his job to think for you. The Bible teaches free will, and free will is about making choices. And if she can't even make choices about what she wants to wear and watch on television, this to me tells me that she feels very a lack of self-esteem and a lack of self-confidence. It tells me that she's still relying on someone else to make decisions for her. And that's not healthy either. There's plenty of people that still believe and have faith that don't give up and say, I can't even make choices for myself. It's like going from one extreme to another. She thinks that there's total freedom or man-made rules, and there's nothing in between. So she's still in total black and white thinking. Throughout this first chapter, the sum of all of it is that she is going to take you on a journey of how she disentangled the false teachings of the IBLP, and how she was able to find the truth in Jesus through these teachers that she has now. She's saying, I reject what my parents have done, but I now accept what my husband is teaching me and what his church is teaching me. She's never had freedom of thought or even the freedom to think outside of the box. So it's challenging, because I think it shows to me that she still has a high dependence on other people to tell her what to do in her life. And it's like she went directly from her dad to her husband, and then she's traded one faith for the other. And while it's good for her to say that this belief system under Gothard is wrong, the concern here is that she might be pointing people to MacArthur, who has a lot of his own problems and has had his own history of covering up abuse. So we'll have to see how the rest of the chapter goes. It's very obvious that Corey is very deeply stamped on this because of the language they use. Like, she uses the word quandary, and I can't think of any time in her life she's ever said quandary. I wish this was in her voice rather than in a language of an academic seminary student, but that's just my thoughts. So Jinger says she's had a good life, great childhood, but yet her childhood was lived under harmful teachings. It's a confusing dichotomy, certainly, and I'll be interested to see how the rest of this goes. She dives into the principles and living under the life of the umbrella of authority, but I don't think you're going to get the tell-all or the tea as much as you might have wanted in the book. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.